Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Perhaps the most misquoted saying in the English language is Proverbs 16:18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. We'll get back to the religion piece in a moment. Too many black people take pride in being ignorant, and many more take pride in being dumb. They think that if they just pretend white supremacy is stupid, then that means it loses its power. It's amazing that at this late date we still have people who are insisting on denying that white supremacy wields power. And I guess they think that as long as they don't admit to that, somehow that means that they've disempowered white supremacy. Kind of like the old, you have to give someone permission to insult you. As long as you don't give them your permission to be insulted, nothing they say matters. Let me tell you something. If you pretend Mike Tyson doesn't hit like a freight train, does that mean he no longer has the power to knock your block off? At the end of his novel Rising Sun, author Michael Crichton quoted a man named David Reynolds who said, "People deny reality. They fight against real feelings caused by real circumstances. They build mental worlds of shoulds, oughts, and might have beens. Real change begins with real appraisal and acceptance of what is. Then realistic action is possible." Crichton noted that Reynolds was referring to the behavior of individuals, but that the same was also true of nations as well. I say that because a lot of us yell from the rooftops that we, the oppressed black survivors of American slavery, are a nation and ought to consider ourselves as such. Putting aside the idiocy of status correction, let's just deal with this concept in its most general terms. If we are a nation, and that's fine by me, then how are we organized? What is our national purpose, our national mission? A society is a group of people who live together, work together, who help one another and protect one another. When you have a group who merely ambles about and doesn't really deal with one another, that's not a society, that's a human herd. Nations have threats, mostly from other nations. So what is the threat facing our nation? Anti-black racism. Are we able to accurately identify the entity, the group most responsible for the threat of anti-black racism? We have white supremacy. Now that we've identified the threat, are we able to quantify it? How much of a threat is it? Well, to answer that, we have to ask, how much power does white supremacy have? Does it only have a little power? If that's the case, then we can ignore it. Hell, if it only has a little power, then it's not really a threat at all. So we can go ahead and rule it out because it's not a problem, right? Okay, that's probably not it. So does it have occasional power? That meaning it's like a thunderstorm. When it happens, we have no control over it. We have to hunker down and wait until it passes, but it's usually pretty brief, and after it passes, we're back in control again. Is that the nature of the threat we face? It's only an occasional problem? Or does it have total power? Does white supremacy, as Neely Fuller put it, control all the major arenas of human activity? You're not going to ignore white supremacy. You're not going to wish it away. I've always said that there are two things that black folks don't handle very well: sports and religion. But even so, we are adults, so we're going to have an adult conversation. I respect all the DAS FBA people who are about empowerment. Problem is, some of you have adopted ideologies that don't make you much different than these foreign Negroes we have to contend with, like a Candace Owens. Some of you think that you're a little smarter than the rest of us. I have no problem with black people who have taken up alternate religions, shall we say, but when your religion gives you a big head and you start running around spouting nonsense full time, then that is a problem. Whether you are a Christian, a Muslim, or some other denomination or faith, that's not the issue. Understand something. Quoting scripture is no substitute for power. White supremacy emphasized religion above all other things on the plantation because they knew it was an effective tool of control, and it was. The difference being, on the plantation, the white man used his Negro flunkies to teach us to obey white people. And then the white plantation owner and the white overseer barked out the orders at us, and we obeyed. You see, white supremacy believes in putting its religion into action, not just quoting verses. What's that old scripture, be ye doers of the word and not just talkers? Oh, the white supremacists believed in inculcating us with that one, so long as we were doers of their word. If your good sermon isn't followed by good actions, then you're bogus. You would think some of us would realize that if we're not careful, we might fall back into that old bad habit of ours. Now, I get a number of people who like to drop the occasional Bible or Muslim verse into their comments, and that's fine. I have no issue with that. But some of us take it a tad too far. I hear from people who pepper their comments with terms like Yah and Esau. This is Black Israelite talk. Now, I've got no problem with the Hebrew Israelites other than that they make a public display of themselves, and that's not how power works. When TBA wanted to put the heat on Amber Geiger and the Dallas PD, he took out billboards. When he wanted to put pressure on Governor Cuomo, he took out billboards in Manhattan with Cuomo's name on it. Amy Cooper was charged soon after. When the uprisings of 2020 went down, TBA and Tariq were both paying people's bail so the cops couldn't hold them. You had Fox News, right-wing hate radio, the white supremacists online. All these professional anti-black hate groups were furious that there were people being arrested and then immediately released. Black people being arrested and immediately released. They saw that there was a program at work. Somebody was getting organized. Black folks were getting organized. Oh, what, you think those white supremacists weren't giving phone calls out and going, hey, ain't you do-good white liberals doing this? No, they knew this wasn't coming from their side. It was coming from ours. And worst of all, they recognized that there was priority being given to black folks who had been charged with assaulting an officer. That scared them for some reason, I don't know why. The bastards realized there were some black folks out here who weren't responding with Bible scriptures. There were some black folks out here who decided that quoting from this or that religious text, that wasn't going to be their response. Now, let me tell you something. If the only thing you do is throw around this or that verse that you memorized, that's no better than the old folks who sang Negro spirituals while Bull Connor and his thugs were brutalizing them. Tell me something. Did whatever deity that you like to quote verses from, be it God, Jehovah, Allah, Yah, or whomever, did they tell you to do anything other than pray? Because from my vantage point, it looks like they didn't. Let's go ahead and use the Hebrew Israelites as an example, since those are the ones who I see on a pretty frequent basis. Right now, as we speak, the Israeli government is in the process of expelling a good number of the black Hebrew Israelites from their country. And many of these black Hebrew Israelites were born in Israel. But the Israelis don't care. And just for the record, this isn't the mean old government of Benjamin Netanyahu doing this, at least not directly. There's a new administration in power now, Naftali Bennett, who was Benjamin Netanyahu's chief of staff. Bennett is 49 years old. He was born in 1972, only a few years after the first black Hebrew Israelites began coming to Israel in any appreciable numbers. Now, Bennett is himself the son of immigrants, as his last name would indicate. His parents were American Jews from San Francisco. They moved to Israel, and Bennett was born there in 72, in the city of Haifa. So this man is the child of immigrants. His people know all about oppression. You better believe that there's going to be Jewish spokespeople who will tell you that all the time. And yet, look at how he's behaving. Right now, these black Hebrew Israelites' status is in limbo. They received a temporary stay on the order to deport them, but that's only going to hold until an appellate court rules on it. I found it perversely appropriate that the name of the Israeli governmental organization that's overseeing this deportation is the Population and Immigration Authority. That's its actual name. The Population Authority, indeed. I don't say this as a means of saying the Hebrew Israelites are somehow deserving of this treatment, because they're not. This is not some demonstration of them being foolish. My point is that they're in the same boat as the rest of us. Yet they have a large number of their cohort who have convinced themselves that they're not. No person, much less a group, can survive if we lie to ourselves. Indulging in good-sounding fiction may make you feel better for a moment, but that's only until some white people come to sue you or the population authority comes to deport you. Religion ought to be a tool of empowerment, and we measure power by the extent to which we can punish those who try to harm us or who interfere with our interests. There's no group of black people on this planet who have the power to do that, but the white supremacists do, and denying that is suicide. I've had a number of disagreements with the Hebrew Israelite types, not because we differ on the need to punish the white supremacists, but because, first of all, they try to shoehorn all these other groups into our mix. People who didn't come out of slavery in the U.S., people who routinely attack us. Seems there's no one, particularly Hispanic women, who they think can't be grandfather claused into the tribe of Israel. Just for the record, you want to know how Egypt fell? You want to know how the very same Southern Europeans and Arabs who the Africans had run off the continent managed to come back and now dominate the northern quarter of the continent of Africa? It was because some black men just couldn't resist snuggling up with them. And I'm sure that if you went back to pharaonic Egypt, you would find some of those black men would be giving you some righteous-sounding pablum to try to disguise it. If you went back to the days of the fall of the Moorish Empire, they would probably give you some good-sounding gibberish to try to justify it too. The more things change, the more they stay the same. This is not a condemnation, just an observation. But my second issue is that they insist on making spectacles of themselves. I've personally seen how white supremacist power operates on 3 different continents. And when I say white supremacist power, I'm talking about true power. Not some idle millionaire sitting around a kidney-shaped pool yelling into a cell phone that his dividend check's not big enough. I'm talking about true power that is literally responsible for much of how the world eats. And we're talking about men who you have never heard of. Because true power lies beneath, behind, beyond, and is almost never directly seen. True power doesn't advertise. Now, I use those guys, by the way, as a case study because they're an example that we're all familiar with. But unfortunately, they're not the only ones. There's plenty others, but they all operate out of the same playbook. Denial. Retreating to inaction and half measures appeals to people because they don't want to put anything on the line. Well, you're not going to defeat white supremacy with your imagination. White supremacy is in control, whether you want to admit it or not. White supremacy is in control because we damn sure aren't. If you choose to deny that, then you're just denying reality. But that only works until white supremacy steps to you. Then all of a sudden you're singing a different tune. Black folks love prison babble. We've acquired a taste for it. Because when a people have been deprived of their power for a long time and forcibly prevented from acting in their own interest, well, they soon become dysfunctional. They cannot act in their own interest. Whenever they try, they make mistakes and give up, or more typically, they don't know where to even begin, so they don't even try. There's nothing wrong with religion if used appropriately. But if inaction or cowardice is your religion and you're trying to find a way to hide this unwillingness to fight for your survival or your fear, you're trying to hide it under pious-sounding rhetoric, it's not going to fool anyone. Not for very long. Because as white supremacy goes on the march and tramples over black people, at some point, there's going to be a critical mass who say action needs to be taken. And they're going to see you still spouting the same old scriptures and saying whatever other canned talking points you've got. And they're going to realize, okay, this guy, he'll just sit there until he dies too. You know, it was a man of the book, Brother Khalid Muhammad, who said it best, lift every voice and sing, but you better lift every fist and swing too at the same time. And he was absolutely right. But religion is only one of many ways that black folks try to justify denying reality. And then they come among the rest of us and they insist that we take refuge in their dream world too, except their little land of make-believe is no refuge at all. I'm disgusted by what I see the Israelis doing to the black Hebrew Israelites. Because I know it ain't about religion, and it's not about immigration status. It's about skin color, full stop. The Ethiopian Jews, who the Israeli government loves to brag about with Operation Exodus. Oh, we rescued the Ethiopian Jews. Yeah, when they brought the Ethiopian Jews to Israel, the Ethiopians were like, my God, you guys are just as horrible with racism as you claim the Nazis were against you. They brought the Ethiopian Jews there simply to bolster the IDF's numbers. It was a PR stunt. And then as soon as they got the Ethiopian Jews there, they started abusing and mistreating them. We are an oppressed people. And the system that we are under has us under oppression, and they've got the upper hand. Now, you may not like having to admit to that, but if you don't admit to that, then you're always going to tell yourself the problem is less serious than it really is. And you're going to tell yourself that the enemy that you're up against has less power than he actually does. At some point, we need safety, security, and stability. We cannot be a people who globally are just bouncing from one crisis to the next. But that means we have to get serious about the situation that we're in and honest about it, a cold clinical appraisal. Ignorance may be bliss, but it's not harmless. Our enemy knows us. You cannot keep a group of people subjugated for half a millennium despite their best and increasingly vigorous efforts to overthrow your control unless you know them and know them very well. Too many of us, however, think that it's cute not to know our enemy. You can't win a game of cards, much less a war, being gleefully ignorant about your opponent. So get over your ego. Stop denying reality. That is, unless you like the idea of being under white supremacy for another 500 years. Good day, and be one.